first time I knew my marriage was dying, I was standing in our bathroom, watching my husband of 9 years brush his teeth with a precision that felt almost violent. Marcus had always been methodical, one of those men who did everything in exactly the same way every single day. But that Tuesday morning, something was different. He brushed for exactly 2 minutes like always, rinsed exactly 3 times like always. But when he caught my eye in the mirror, he looked away so fast it was like I'd burned him. I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I used to believe I could read people. 12 years as a clinical psychologist will convince you that human behavior follows patterns, that you can predict what someone will do based on what they've always done. The irony is that I spent my days helping other people see the truth about their relationships while completely missing what was happening in my own. That morning, Marcus smelled different. Not bad, just off. There was the sharp citrusy scent clinging to his shirt collar, something bright and young that he would never choose for himself. When I asked about it, he gave me this quick, nervous smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Must be the new detergent," he said. "I grabbed whatever was on sale." But we'd been using the same detergent for 5 years. I knew what our laundry smelled like, and this wasn't it. I nodded, smiled back, and filed it away in the part of my brain that was starting to catalog all the small wrongnesses that had been accumulating like dust in corners I'd been too busy to clean. The phone thing had started maybe 2 months earlier. Marcus used to leave his phone everywhere. On the kitchen counter, the nightstand, the arm of the couch while he watched basketball. I'd answer it sometimes when he was in the shower or outside working on the yard, take messages from his work buddies or his brother. It was just normal married life, the kind of casual sharing that happens when you've been together long enough that boundaries blur into trust. Then suddenly, the phone was always with him. In his pocket when he cooked dinner, on the bathroom sink when he showered, face down on his nightstand while he slept. And he changed the lock screen, too. Used to be a picture of us from our trip to Costa Rica, both of us sunburned and grinning on some black sand beach. Now it was just a generic mountain landscape, the kind of stock photo that comes preloaded on phones, impersonal and empty. We lived in Riverside Heights, a neighborhood in Portland, Oregon that felt like someone had designed it specifically to look like happiness. Tree-lined streets with those old craftsman houses that everyone takes pictures of, coffee shops on every corner, Saturday farmers markets where people actually knew each other's names. I'd chosen this place deliberately after finishing my residency, after years of clinical rotations and hospital shifts, and living in apartments that smelled like other people's cooking. I wanted roots. I wanted permanence. I wanted a life that felt solid and real. Marcus had wanted it too, or so I'd thought. He worked as a civil engineer for the city, spending his days designing water systems and traffic patterns, creating the invisible infrastructure that kept everything running smoothly. He was good at his job, patient and thorough, the kind of person who double-checked everything and never missed a deadline. That's what I'd fallen in love with, actually. His steadiness, his reliability. The way he made me feel like I could stop holding my breath and just exist. But steadiness, I was learning, could also mean predictability. And predictability apparently could become boring. The laugh had changed too. Marcus used to have this deep, genuine laugh that came from his belly, the kind that made other people want to laugh along with him. But lately, when he looked at his phone, this other sound would come out, higher, more performative, like he was trying to prove something to whoever was on the other end of those messages. And he'd smile at his screen in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months, this soft, secretive expression that made something in my chest feel tight and wrong. I started noticing other things. He'd flinch when I came up behind him, actually flinch, like I'd caught him doing something he shouldn't be doing. "Sorry," he'd say, "you startled me." But I walked the same way I'd always walked. Our house had the same creaky floorboards it had always had. He knew the sound of my footsteps as well as he knew his own heartbeat. What had changed wasn't how I moved. It was what he was hiding. My practice became both a refuge and a special kind of torture during those weeks. I'd sit across from clients, helping them untangle the knots in their relationships, listening to stories of betrayal and lies and broken trust, and the whole time I'd be thinking about Marcus, about the way he'd started working late more often, about how he'd suddenly become interested in going to the gym every evening, coming home showered and energized at 9:30 at night, about the new clothes that started appearing in his closet, shirts that were more fitted, jeans that were darker and more expensive than anything he'd worn in years. "You look nice," I'd say when he emerged wearing something new, and he'd shrug like it was nothing. Needed an update. All my old stuff was getting worn out. But his old stuff wasn't worn out. It was hanging in the closet right next to these new things. Perfectly fine. Just apparently not good enough anymore for whatever he was trying to become. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon. I finished with my last client early and decided to surprise Marcus by picking up dinner from that Thai place he loved and meeting him at his office. We could eat together, maybe go for a walk along the waterfront, try to reconnect in some small way that might start to close the distance that had been growing between us. I parked in the visitor's lot at the Public Works building and texted him. In the lobby, brought pad thai, come down when you can. 3 minutes later, my phone buzzed. In a meeting, running late. Why don't you head home and I'll see you there? I looked up at the building. Through the glass doors, I could see the security guard at his desk, the elevator banks beyond him, the fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly sickly. And I made a decision. I walked inside, signed in at the desk with a smile, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where Marcus's department was housed. The receptionist recognized me, waved me through. I walked down the familiar hallway, past the conference rooms and cubicles, toward Marcus's office at the end. His door was closed. Through the frosted glass, I could see his silhouette. He wasn't alone. I stopped walking, just stood there in the hallway with a bag of Thai food in my hands, watching shadows move on the other side of that glass. 2 people, standing close. Too close. And then they separated, and I heard a woman's laugh. Light and young, followed by Marcus saying something I couldn't make out. I could have knocked, could have opened the door and walked in and confronted whatever was happening in that room. But something stopped me. Some instinct that said, once I opened that door, there would be no going back. The not knowing would become knowing, and knowing would require action, and action would mean the end of the life I'd built. So instead, I turned around and walked back down the hallway, back to the elevator, back through the lobby. I drove home and put the Thai food in the refrigerator and sat on our couch in the house we'd bought together, and I waited. Marcus came home at 8:30, apologizing about the meeting running long. He kissed my forehead, asked about my day, heated up the pad thai, and ate it while telling me about some drainage project that was causing problems. He was relaxed, normal, like nothing at all was wrong. Like he hadn't been standing too close to another woman in his office just a few hours earlier. I watched him and said nothing, because I needed to be sure. I needed evidence, not just suspicion. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I decided how to deal with it. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I did something I'd never done before. I took his phone from his nightstand, lifted it carefully so it wouldn't buzz or light up, and carried it to the bathroom. My hands were shaking as I tried his passcode, the same one he'd been using for years, our wedding anniversary. It didn't work. He'd changed it. I stood there in our bathroom at 2 a.m, holding my husband's locked phone, and felt something inside me go very cold and very quiet. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't anxiety or insecurity, or the kind of paranoia that comes from spending too much time listening to other people's problems. This was real. He'd changed his passcode. He was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed of it either. When you suspect your life is a lie, you do what you have to do to find the truth. I put his phone back, went to my office, and sent an email to a colleague who did forensic psychology work, the kind of expert who testified in custody cases and criminal trials. I told her I needed a referral for a private investigator, someone discreet and thorough. She sent me a name by morning. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Help us build this community so we can bring more interesting and exciting stories for you from around the world. Your help is much appreciated. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. Nothing. That's fill blank. I told her everything, except the part about how much it was destroying me to sit there cataloging my husband's betrayal, like it was a case study instead of my life. Sarah listened, took notes, and when I finished, she looked at me with something like sympathy. "How long have you been married?" she asked. 9 years, together for 12. Kids? No. We kept saying we'd wait until the time was right. Now I'm glad we did. She nodded. I'll need some information from you. His full name, workplace, vehicle information, typical schedule. And I'll need a retainer. My rate is $150 an hour. And a case like this usually takes about 20 to 30 hours of work. I didn't even blink. Whatever it takes. I need to know the truth. You understand that once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Some of my clients find out their suspicions were wrong and they're relieved. Others find out they were right and they wish they'd never asked. Are you sure you want to do this? I thought about Marcus lying to my face, about that locked phone, about the distance in his eyes when he looked at me now like I was an obligation instead of a choice. I'm sure. Sarah started her surveillance the following Monday. I went to work, saw my clients, listened to their problems, gave advice about communication and trust, and working through difficulties. The whole time, Sarah was following my husband, documenting his movements, taking photographs, building a case file of his lies. It took her 4 days. 4 days to confirm what I'd already known in my bones, but hadn't wanted to believe. 4 days to turn my suspicions into facts. My fears into evidence, my marriage into something that had been dead longer than I'd realized. We met again at the same coffee shop. Sarah had a folder with her, thick and heavy. She set it on the table between us like it might explode. "Before I show you this," she said quietly, "I want you to know that I'm sorry. This part of my job never gets easier." I picked up the folder and opened it. Photographs, time-stamped, dated, organized. Marcus leaving work at 5:30 and driving not toward home, but toward the Pearl District. Marcus parking on a tree-lined street and walking to a modern apartment building. Marcus being buzzed inside. And then, an hour later, Marcus leaving that building with a woman. She was young, maybe late 20s, with long dark hair and that kind of effortless style that takes actual effort to achieve. In the photos, she was laughing, looking up at Marcus with an expression that made my stomach turn. And Marcus, my steady, reliable, boring husband, was looking back at her like she'd hung the moon. There were more photos, the two of them at restaurants I'd never been to, walking through Pioneer Square, holding coffee cups, getting into his car together, and then the ones that made me close the folder and sit there breathing very carefully, trying not to be sick right there in this public place. Photos of them entering a hotel. Time-stamped arrival. Time-stamped departure 3 hours later. Multiple dates, multiple hotels. "Her name is Sienna Walsh," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "She works in the planning department at the city. Started there about 8 months ago. She's 28, single, no kids. They've been seeing each other for at least 2 months, probably longer. I documented 7 meetings in 4 days, 3 of which included hotel visits. I pulled his credit card statements. She slid another paper across the table. He's been paying for hotel rooms, dinners, gifts. There's a charge here for jewelry. Another for flowers. This one's for a weekend at a coastal resort 3 weeks ago. The same weekend he told you he was at a conference in Seattle. I stare at the numbers, at the evidence of Marcus's double life laid out in black and white. The money he'd been spending on her, while telling me we needed to be careful about our budget. The lies he told so smoothly, so convincingly, that I'd never question them. "Is that enough?" Sarah asked, "or do you need more?" "That's enough," I whispered. "That's more than enough." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Dr. Vasquez. I really am." I took the folder home and hid it in my office, behind the medical texts on the top shelf where Marcus would never look. Then I went about my evening like nothing had changed, made dinner, asked about his day, smiled when he kissed me goodnight. I was good at it, I realized, just as good at lying as he was. Maybe we'd been practicing on each other all along. That weekend, Marcus told me he needed to go into the office to catch up on some work. A Sunday, he said, just for a few hours. He'd be back by dinner. I waited 30 minutes after he left. Then I called Sarah. "He's on the move. Can you follow him?" "Already on it. I've had eyes on your house since Friday." An hour later, she called back. "He's at her apartment. Went straight there. Want me to keep watching?" "No," I said. "I know where he is." That's enough. I sat in our living room, in the house we'd chosen together, surrounded by the life we'd built, and I made a decision. Not in anger, not in hurt, but in that cold, clear space where all my training came to bear. I'd spent 12 years learning how people worked, how they thought, how they justified their actions and rationalized their choices. I knew that confronting Marcus would lead to denials, excuses, promises to change. I knew that he'd try to make this my fault somehow, would say I'd been too focused on my work, too distant, not attentive enough. I knew all the patterns because I'd seen them play out in my office 1,000 times. And I knew something else. I knew that I deserved better than this. Better than lies. Better than being someone's backup plan. Better than a husband who could look me in the eye and pretend to be faithful while building a whole secret life with someone else. So I didn't confront him. I planned. On Monday morning, I called the best divorce attorney in Portland. Her name was Victoria Reeves, and she had a reputation for being both brilliant and absolutely ruthless. Her office was in one of those old buildings downtown, all exposed brick and huge windows. She was maybe 50, perfectly put together, in a way that made me feel both underdressed and immediately confident that I'd chosen the right person. I showed her the folder Sarah had compiled, showed her the credit card statements, the photographs, the hotel receipts. She went through everything methodically, making notes, asking questions. "This is comprehensive documentation," she said when she finished. "Your investigator did excellent work. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, so technically, the adultery doesn't affect the legal dissolution itself, but it absolutely matters when we're discussing asset division and spousal support. How long have you been married?" 9 years. "Any prenuptial agreement?" "No." "Children?" "No. Thank God." She nodded, making more notes. "Property? We own our house jointly. Bought it 6 years ago. Both our names on the mortgage and title. Transfer accounts? Investments? Both of us have 401ks through our jobs. Joint savings account, joint checking. I make more than he does. Quite a bit more, actually." Victoria looked up at that. "How much more?" "I gross about $200,000 a year from my practice. He makes around $80,000. And the house? What's it worth?" "And the house? We bought it for $450,000. It's probably worth $600,000 now. We owe about $300,000 on the mortgage." Victoria leaned back in her chair. "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to file for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. We're going to ask for an equitable division of all marital assets, which in this case means the house, both retirement accounts, and all savings. Because you're the higher earner and because of his documented infidelity, we're going to argue that he should receive a smaller portion of the assets than he might otherwise be entitled to." We're also going to make very sure that he doesn't get any spousal support, which he might otherwise try to claim given the income disparity. Can you do that? Can you actually use the affair to affect the settlement? Technically, adultery isn't supposed to matter in Oregon's no-fault system. But practically, judges are human. When they see evidence of one spouse systematically deceiving another, spending marital assets on an affair, they tend to exercise their discretion in ways that favor the innocent party. I've been doing this for 25 years, Dr. Vasquez. I know how to work the system. Ellen, good, I said, because I want him to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to lose something that matters to him. And I want to make sure he can't bleed me dry financially while he's building his new life with her. Ellen, Victoria smiled, and it wasn't a particularly warm smile. Then we're going to get along just fine. I'll have papers drawn up by end of week. When do you want him served? Ellen, I thought about it. I want to control the timing. I want to be the one who tells him it's over, not some process server showing up at his office. Can you have the papers ready, but hold off on official service? Absolutely. Some people find it more satisfying to hand their spouse the papers personally. It's your call. Period. I left Victoria's office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. This wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was clarity. It was forward motion. It was taking back control of my life from someone who'd been slowly dismantling it behind my back. The papers arrived on Friday, delivered to my office in a plain manila envelope. I brought them home and hid them with Sarah's folder, behind the medical texts, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks after I'd first met with Victoria. Marcus came home from work in a good mood, whistling as he hung up his jacket. He kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner, suggested we watch that show we've been meaning to catch up on. Actually, I said, my voice steady and calm, we need to talk. Something in my tone made him freeze. Okay, what's up? Sit down, Marcus. And I saw the exact moment he realized something was seriously wrong. His face went pale, his hands gripped his knees, and he looked at me with something like fear. I pulled out Sarah's folder and Victoria's envelope and set them both on the coffee table between us. I know about Sienna. Strong, the color drained from his face completely. Elena, I don't. I held up my hand. Don't insult me by lying. I have photographs, credit card statements, hotel receipts. I hired a private investigator, Marcus. I know everything. I know where she lives. I know where you go when you tell me you're working late. I know about the weekend at the coast. I know about the jewelry and the flowers and every single lie you've told me over the past 3 months. He was shaking now, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't figure out what to say. Finally, he managed, "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're having an affair. You've been lying to me, spending our money on her, building a relationship with someone else while pretending everything was fine with us. That's not up for debate, Marcus. That's documented fact." Elena, please let me explain. Explain what? That you fell in love with someone else? That I wasn't exciting enough anymore? That you needed something I couldn't give you? Save it. I've heard every version of this story in my office, and they all end the same way. You made choices, Marcus. You chose to betray me. You chose to lie. You chose to turn our marriage into a joke, while I kept believing in it. Tears were running down his face now. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened. We started talking, and then we were having lunch, and then you decided to sleep with her. And then you decided to keep sleeping with her. And then you decided to take her away for a romantic weekend while telling me you were at a conference. Those weren't things that just happened, Marcus. Those were decisions you made, over and over again. I love you, he said desperately. I still love you, Elena. This thing with Sienna, it's not real. It's not like what we have. We don't have anything anymore. I picked up the envelope from Victoria's office and held it out. These are divorce papers. My attorney has already filed them. You're going to be officially served next week, but I wanted to do you the courtesy of telling you myself. Our marriage is over. He stared at the envelope like it might bite him. You can't be serious. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll end it with Sienna right now. I'll do whatever it takes. It's too late for that. Do you know what hurts the most, Marcus? It's not even the affair. It's how easy it was for you to lie to me. How you came home every night and kissed me and told me you loved me while you were planning your next hotel visit with her. You looked me in the eye and lied, and you were so good at it. That's what I can't forgive. Not the sex, not even Sienna herself. The lying, the fact that you could watch me trust you and use that trust as a weapon against me. Please, he whispered. Please don't do this. I'll prove to you that I can change. I'll do anything. I don't want you to change. I want you to leave. I want you out of this house, out of my life, and I want you to understand that this is what you chose. Every time you texted her, every time you lied about working late, every time you spent our money on her, you were choosing this outcome. So don't act surprised now that it's here. Stalemate. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow, I want you to find somewhere else to stay. We'll work out the details through our attorneys. You'll need to get one, by the way. A good one. Because I'm not going to make this easy for you. Elena, we're done talking, Marcus. We're done with everything. Read the papers. They'll explain what happens next. I left him sitting there with the divorce papers in his hands and went to my office. Closed the door, locked it, and finally let myself cry. Not because I'd lost him. I'd lost the real Marcus months ago, if he had ever really existed at all. I cried because I'd wasted 9 years on someone who could betray me so completely. I cried because I'd been so sure we were building something permanent, and it had all been as fragile as glass. I cried because I was 41 years old and starting over, and that was terrifying, even when you knew it was right. But the tears didn't last long. I'd grieved this marriage already, during all those weeks of suspicion and investigation. This was just the final letting go, the acknowledgement that it was really over. When I came out of my office an hour later, Marcus was still on the couch. The papers spread around him, his face in his hands. He looked up when he heard me. I really am sorry, he said. For what it's worth, I never wanted it to end like this. Then, you should have thought about that before you started sleeping with someone else, I said, and went to bed in the bedroom that would soon be mine alone, in the house that would soon need to be sold or bought out, in the life that was already transforming into something new and unknown and entirely mine. Marcus moved out 3 days later. He went to stay with his brother across town while we navigated what Victoria called the dissolution process, which was a remarkably clinical way of describing the dismantling of a life built together. Those first few weeks were strange. The house felt simultaneously too empty and too full, echoing with absence but crowded with memories I couldn't escape. Every room held reminders of who we'd been or who I'd thought we were. The kitchen where we'd cook together on Sunday mornings. A living room where we'd watched movies curled up on the couch. The bedroom where we'd made love and made plans and promised each other forever. I threw myself into work, saw back-to-back clients, took on new cases, stayed at the office until 8 or 9 at night. My colleagues noticed, asked if I was okay with that careful concern people use when they suspect you're not but want to give you space to pretend. I told them I was fine, that I was just busy, that everything was under control. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the senior therapist in our practice and my closest friend at work, cornered me one evening as I was locking up my office. Elena, she said gently, you can't therapist your way out of your own pain. I've watched you do it for 3 weeks now. You're giving everyone else permission to feel their feelings while refusing to feel your own. I'm processing, I said, in my own way. You're avoiding. There's a difference. She touched my arm. What happened with Marcus? It's okay to be devastated. It's okay to fall apart a little. You don't have to hold it together for everyone all the time. I looked at this woman who'd mentored me, who taught me half of what I knew about helping people, and felt something crack in my carefully maintained composure. If I fall apart, I said quietly, I'm afraid I won't be able to put myself back together. Then fall apart and let other people help with the putting back together. That's what community is for. That's what friendship is for. You can't do this alone, Elena. You shouldn't have to. That night, I called my sister Lucia in San Francisco. She was 3 years younger than me, a corporate lawyer with a wife and twin daughters and a life that looked nothing like mine, but somehow made perfect sense for her. Marcus and I are getting divorced, I said when she answered, and then I told her everything. The affair, the investigation, the lies, the lawyer, all of it, spilling out in a rush of words I hadn't realized I'd been holding in. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I'm going to kill him, Lucia finally said. I'm literally going to drive up there and murder your husband, ex-husband, whatever, he's dead. Despite everything, I laughed. Don't. He's not worth going to prison for. Are you okay? Stupid question. You're obviously not okay. But are you safe? Are you eating? Should I come up there? I'm okay. Really. I'm handling it. Elena, Lucia's voice was soft now, the lawyer persona dropping away. You don't have to handle everything alone. That's always been your thing, being the strong one, the capable one, the one who has all the answers. But this is the kind of thing you need people for. I know, I'm trying. It's just hard. Of course it's hard. The man you loved betrayed you. Your marriage ended. Your future looks completely different than what you thought it was going to be. That's not something you just bounce back from. We talked for another hour about Marcus, about Sienna, about the divorce proceedings, and the house, and what came next. When we finally hung up, I felt lighter. Not better exactly, but less alone. The divorce moved forward with the kind of grinding bureaucratic slowness that made every day feel like a week. Victoria was as good as her reputation suggested, negotiating aggressively for my interests, while Marcus's attorney, a nervous young man fresh out of law school, tried desperately to get his client some kind of fair deal. Marcus wanted to keep the house. It's my home, he argued through his lawyer. I shouldn't have to lose my home because of one mistake. Victoria's response was swift and merciless. Your client didn't make one mistake. He made approximately 90 mistakes over 3 months, each one documented and time-stamped. My client, who was the faithful spouse and the higher earner, has no interest in sharing equity with someone who violated the marital contract so egregiously. Either he agrees to my client keeping the house with appropriate buyout of his equity, or we go to trial and let a judge see exactly how your client spent marital assets on his affair. His choice. Marcus chose the buyout. He couldn't afford to fight, couldn't afford the publicity of a trial, couldn't afford to have his affair detailed in public court records where anyone could see them. So he took his share of the equity, signed away his rights to the house, and agreed to a property settlement that Victoria called quite favorable for someone who behaved so poorly. The divorce was final 6 months after I'd confronted Marcus with those photographs. 6 months from discovery to dissolution, from married to single, from we to me. The judge signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, and just like that, 9 years of marriage became a legal document filed away in some courthouse archive. I didn't feel relieved. I didn't feel vindicated. I mostly felt tired. That afternoon, I canceled my client appointments and drove to the coast by myself, found a quiet beach near Cannon Beach where the tourists didn't usually go, and walked along the sand for hours. The Oregon coast in November is cold and gray and absolutely beautiful in its bleakness. The waves crash against the rocks with a violence that feels cleansing, and the wind strips away everything except what's essential. I stood at the edge of the water, letting the spray hit my face, and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The grief, the anger, the sense of waste, the fear of starting over, the shame of being someone who helped other people fix their relationships but couldn't save her own. All of it rose up and crashed over me like those waves, and I let it. Didn't fight it, didn't try to therapist my way through it, just felt it. When I drove home that evening, something had shifted. I wasn't healed, wasn't over it, wasn't ready to move on, but I was ready to start being ready. I'd been back in my empty house for about an hour when my doorbell rang. I considered not answering, still raw from my day at the beach, but curiosity won out. Sienna Walsh stood on my porch. She was smaller in person than she'd looked in the photographs, more uncertain. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. She looked young and scared, and like she desperately regretted coming here. "Dr. Vasquez," she said, "I'm sorry to just show up like this. I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I needed to talk to you. Please." Every instinct told me to close the door in her face. This woman had slept with my husband, had helped him lie to me, had been part of dismantling my marriage. I owed her nothing, least of all my time or attention. But I'd spent my whole career learning to listen, to understand, to see the human being behind the behavior. And something in Sienna's expression, some genuine distress, made me pause. "You have 5 minutes," I said, and didn't invite her inside. We stood there on the porch in the November cold, two women connected by one man's bad choices. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I know it doesn't matter. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need to say it anyway. What I did was wrong. What we did was wrong. And I'm sorry." "Why are you here, Sienna? Marcus and I are already divorced. The damage is done." "I know. I needed you to understand something. Marcus told me you were separated. When we first started, seeing each other, he said you were getting divorced, that you'd been living separate lives for over a year, that it was just a matter of paperwork." I believed him. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Of course he did. That's the oldest line in the book. You're 28 years old, Sienna. Did you really not know better? She flinched. I wanted to believe him. That's not an excuse, I know it's not, but I liked him. He made me feel special, like I was important to someone. And by the time I realized he'd been lying, that you weren't separated at all, I was already in too deep. "So you kept seeing him anyway?" "Yes." She was crying now, tears running down her face. "I kept seeing him, and I kept lying to myself that it was okay, that he was going to leave you, that we'd be together for real. I was stupid and selfish, and I destroyed your marriage." "No," I said, and my voice was hard. "Marcus destroyed my marriage. You helped, sure, but he's the one who made vows to me. He's the one who promised to be faithful. He's the one who lied to both of us. You were the weapon he used, but he's the one who pulled the trigger. Does that make it better, knowing that?" "No, it doesn't make it better at all, but it makes it true." I looked at her, this young woman who'd somehow become part of the worst period of my life, and felt something unexpected. Pity. "Is he still lying to you? Still saying he's going to leave his wife, even though we're already divorced?" She shook her head. "He broke up with me. 2 weeks after you filed for divorce, he told me it was a mistake, that he needed space to figure himself out. He hasn't talked to me since. I see him at work sometimes, and he acts like I don't exist. So he used you and threw you away when you stopped being convenient, just like he did to me. I guess I deserved it." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. What you did was wrong, Sienna. You helped him betray me, and that caused real harm. But you were also 28 years old being pursued by a man 15 years older who lied to you from the beginning. That doesn't erase your responsibility, but it puts it in context. I don't know what I expected from coming here," she said quietly. "Forgiveness, maybe? Or just, I don't know, acknowledgement that I'm sorry. I know you don't owe me anything, but I needed you to know that I see what I did. I understand it was wrong, and I'm sorry. I looked at her for a long moment. I appreciate the apology. I do. But I don't forgive you, Sienna. Maybe someday I will, but not today. Today I'm still too angry and too hurt. What I will say is this: learn from it. Don't ever let yourself be someone's secret again. Don't ever help someone lie to the person they're supposed to love. And when someone tells you their marriage is over, make them prove it before you believe them. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm going to leave the city. I already put in my notice at work. I can't keep working there, seeing him, knowing what I did. I'm moving back to Eugene, where my family is. Starting over. Good luck with that, I said, and I almost meant it. She walked back to her car, and I watched her drive away. Then I went inside, locked the door, and stood in my quiet house, feeling something like closure settling over me. I didn't forgive Marcus. I didn't forgive Sienna. But I understood them a little better. Understood how people make choices that destroy things. How they rationalize and justify until the wrong thing starts to look right. Understanding didn't mean forgiving, but it meant I could stop spending quite so much energy being angry. And that was something. Life developed a new rhythm over the next few months. Work during the day, quiet evenings at home, learning to cook for one person, learning to sleep in a bed that felt too big for just me. Some nights were hard, full of memories and what-ifs, and the kind of loneliness that feels like a physical weight. Other nights were peaceful, almost meditative, as I rediscovered who I was, without Marcus, without marriage, without the identity I'd built around being someone's wife. I started be myself, seeing a colleague in a different practice, sitting in the client's chair for once instead of the therapist's. Dr. Raymond Kim was in his 60s, with a gentle manner and an unsettling ability to see through all my professional defenses. You're very good at analyzing yourself, he observed in our third session. You can identify your feelings, understand their origins, explain them in clinical terms. But can you actually feel them without turning them into case studies? I'm trying, I said. Try harder. You're in here because you need to heal, not because you need to understand yourself better. You already understand yourself. Now you need to actually do the work of grieving what you lost. So I did the work, cried in his office, raged about Marcus's betrayal, mourned the future I'd thought I was building, talked about how it felt to be 41 and single, and wondering if I'd ever trust anyone enough to try again. Unpacked all the ways I'd made myself smaller in my marriage, prioritizing Marcus's comfort over my own needs, avoiding conflict by not asking for what I wanted. You're a caretaker by profession, Dr. Kim said. That's a beautiful thing, but it can become pathological if you're not careful. You took care of Marcus's ego, his comfort, his needs, and in return, he took advantage of that caretaking to hide his betrayal. You need to learn to take care of yourself first, Elena, not selfishly, but appropriately. Your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. It was work, hard, painful, necessary work, but slowly, incrementally, I started to feel more like myself. Not the self I'd been before Marcus, but something new, something that incorporated all of it. The marriage, the betrayal, the divorce, the healing. 8 months after the divorce finalized, Patricia Morrison invited me to a dinner party at her house. I almost said no, still not quite ready for social situations, but she was persistent. You need to get out, she said. You need to remember how to be around people who aren't your clients. Just come for a couple of hours. If you hate it, you can leave. The party was small, maybe 10 people, mostly colleagues from our practice and their partners. Everyone was kind and careful with me, clearly briefed about my divorce, trying not to say anything that might be painful. I appreciated it, but also found it exhausting, all that careful politeness. I was in Patricia's kitchen, refilling my wine when someone said behind me, "So you're the famous Dr. Vasquez." It was Patricia. I turned to find a woman about my age, maybe a few years younger, with short silver hair and paint-stained hands. She was smiling like we were already friends. Famous? I asked. Patricia talks about you constantly. Says you're brilliant, a natural healer, going through a rough patch but coming out stronger. I'm Zoe, by the way. I teach art at Portland State. We talked for the rest of the evening, standing in that kitchen and then moving to the back porch where it was quieter. Zoe was funny and sharp and had no filter whatsoever. She told me about her own divorce 5 years earlier, didn't sugarcoat or make it sound easier than it was. It was hell, she said bluntly. Absolute hell. My ex-husband cheated with his graduate assistant. Very original, I know. I spent a year being angry and another year being sad, and then I woke up one day and realized I didn't actually miss him anymore. I missed being married, missed having a partner. But him specifically? Nope. That's when I knew I was going to be okay. I'm not there yet, I admitted. I don't miss Marcus, but I'm still angry about what he did, still hurt by it. Of course you are. That's normal. Give yourself time, Elena. You're 8 months out from a 9-year marriage ending in betrayal. You're allowed to still be processing. We exchanged numbers before I left that night, and Zoe started texting me. Random things, articles she thought I'd find interesting, invitations to art shows or coffee or walks in Forest Park. She was persistent but not pushy, and slowly, I found myself saying yes more often than no. Zoe became my first real friend post-divorce. Someone who knew me only as Elena, not as Marcus's wife or as half of a couple. We'd meet for breakfast on Saturday mornings, walk for hours through the city's parks, sit in her studio while she painted and I read. She introduced me to her circle of friends, artists and writers and musicians, people who lived differently than I did, whose lives looked nothing like the conventional path I'd been following. You need to expand your horizons, Zoe said one day, while we were hiking up to Pittock Mansion. You've spent your whole adult life being responsible. The good student, the dedicated professional, the faithful wife. Maybe it's time to figure out who Elena is when she's not trying to be good. I like being responsible, I protested. I'm not saying stop being responsible. I'm saying add some irresponsibility to the mix. Be spontaneous sometimes. Do something just because it sounds fun, not because it serves some greater purpose. Live a little. So I tried. Took a pottery class even though I had no artistic talent. Said yes to a last-minute road trip to Crater Lake with Zoe and 2 of her friends. Went to concerts and art openings and dinner parties where I didn't know anyone. Slowly, gradually, my world expanded beyond work and home and the narrow boundaries I'd built around my life. A year after the divorce, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. I was meeting a client nearby and had stopped in for a latte, and there he was, standing in line ahead of me. He'd lost weight, looked older, tired in a way that seemed to go deeper than just physical exhaustion. He saw me and froze. Elena. Marcus. I kept my voice neutral, polite but not warm. How are you? I'm well. You? Fine. Good. Working a lot. He hesitated, then said, You look good. Happy. Thank you. We stood there in awkward silence while the line moved forward. Finally, Marcus said, I've wanted to reach out, to apologize properly, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me. Probably better that you didn't, I said honestly. I've moved on, Marcus. I don't wish you ill, but I also don't need closure or an apology at this point. What happened happened. We both have to live with it. I'm in therapy, he said suddenly, trying to figure out why I did what I did, why I sabotaged something good. My therapist says I have issues with intimacy, that I push people away when they get too close. That sounds like important work, I said, and meant it. I hope you figure it out. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't screwed everything up? If we'd worked things out? I looked at him, this man I'd loved and married and built a life with, and felt nothing but a mild sadness for both of us. No, I said gently, I don't. That version of us is gone, Marcus. We can't go back, and honestly, I wouldn't want to. What you did taught me things about myself that I needed to learn. about what I'll accept and what I won't, about the kind of relationship I want and deserve. So in a strange way, as much as it hurt, I'm grateful it happened. Grateful, he repeated, like he couldn't quite believe it. For the lesson. Not for the pain, but for what came after. I'm building a different life now, and I like it. I like who I'm becoming. That wouldn't have happened if we'd stayed together. The barista called for the next order, and Marcus moved to the counter. I stayed in line, and when he walked past with his coffee, he stopped. I really am sorry, Elena. For what it's worth. I know. Take care of yourself, Marcus. He left, and I ordered my latte and went to my meeting, and that was that. No dramatic closure, no final confrontation. Just two people who used to be married, running into each other and being civil. It felt anticlimactic and exactly right. That evening, I called Lucia and told her about the encounter. How did it feel? She asked. Seeing him again? Honestly? Like running into an old acquaintance. Someone I used to know, but don't anymore. It wasn't painful, wasn't angry, just neutral. That's growth, hermana. That's what healing looks like. I think you're right. 2 years after my divorce, I took a sabbatical from my practice. I'd been working nonstop for 15 years, building my career, establishing my reputation, helping other people navigate their lives while forgetting to actually live my own. Dr. Kim had suggested it during one of our sessions, pointed out that I was using work the same way some people use alcohol or drugs, as a way to avoid being present with myself. So, I arranged for coverage, gave my clients appropriate referrals, and took 6 months off. I didn't have a plan, which was terrifying for someone who'd spent her whole life planning everything. I just knew I needed space, time, room to figure out what came next. I traveled, spent 3 weeks in Mexico, practicing my rusty Spanish and eating street food and lying on beaches, reading novels instead of medical journals. Went to New York and saw every Broadway show I could get tickets for. Visited Lucia in San Francisco and spent quality time with my nieces, who are now 5 and hilarious and completely unimpressed by their aunt's professional credentials. Are you a princess? One of them asked. No, sweetie, I'm a doctor. That's boring. You should be a princess. Hard to argue with that logic. I came back to Portland in late spring, the city covered in blooms, everything green and new and alive. My house felt different when I walked in, less like a museum to a failed marriage and more like just a place where I lived, neutral and waiting to be filled with whatever came next. I reopened my practice slowly, seeing fewer clients than before, being more selective about who I took on. I'd learned during my sabbatical that I didn't want to work 80-hour weeks anymore. Didn't want my entire identity tied up in being Dr. Vasquez, the therapist. I wanted balance, wanted a life that included work but wasn't consumed by it. Zoe convinced me to take a painting class with her that summer. I was terrible at it, genuinely awful, but I didn't care. There was something freeing about being bad at something, about doing it anyway just because it was enjoyable. You're too in your head, Zoe would say, watching me frown at my canvas. Stop trying to make it good. Just make it. I don't know how to stop trying to make it good. That's your whole problem, Elena. You're always trying to optimize, to perfect, to get everything right. Sometimes things can just be messy and fun and imperfect. She was right, of course. That had always been my tendency, to control and perfect and make everything just so. The divorce had shattered that illusion of control, taught me that sometimes things fall apart, no matter how carefully you try to hold them together. Now I was learning the flip side. Sometimes you had to let things be messy to discover something real. This is Revenge Stories, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If these words resonate with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're listening from. Help us grow this community so we can continue bringing you powerful stories from around the world. Your support means everything. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. I started dating again, cautiously at first. Coffee dates that went nowhere. Nice men who were perfectly fine but didn't spark anything. I wasn't looking for perfection anymore. Wasn't trying to find someone to complete me or fix me or provide security. I was just looking for someone interesting, someone honest, someone who could match my newfound commitment to living authentically. His name was Ben Torres, and I met him at a community meeting about development in our neighborhood. He was an architect, divorced with a teenage daughter, arguing passionately against a proposed condo project that would destroy a historic building. After the meeting, we got coffee and talked for 3 hours. He was different from Marcus in almost every way. Open where Marcus had been closed, emotionally articulate where Marcus had been defensive, content with who he was instead of constantly trying to prove something. We took it slow, both of us carrying scars from previous relationships, both wary of rushing into something that might replicate past mistakes. "I'm not looking for someone to save me," I told him on our 4th date. "I've done the work of saving myself. I'm looking for someone to build something with, if that makes sense." "Perfect sense," he said. "I spent 5 years after my divorce figuring out who I was outside of being someone's husband. I'm not interested in losing that again. But I am interested in seeing if 2 whole people can create something together that's bigger than either of them individually." We dated for a year before he moved in. Another year before we started talking about marriage. It wasn't a whirlwind romance. Wasn't the kind of passionate, all-consuming thing you see in movies. It was steadier than that, deeper, built on actual compatibility instead of fantasy and projection. "Do you ever compare me to Marcus?" Ben asked one night while we were cooking dinner together. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not in bad ways, just noticing differences. You communicate directly instead of avoiding. You tell me when you're upset instead of letting it fester. You don't hide who you are." "Does it scare you, getting married again after what happened?" "Terrified, but I'm not letting fear make my decisions anymore. I love you, Ben. I trust you. And I know that trust could be broken, that any relationship could end. But I'd rather take that risk than spend my life protecting myself from potential pain." We got married 3 years after my divorce from Marcus, in a small ceremony at Hoyt Arboretum with just family and close friends. It was nothing like my first wedding, which had been big and traditional and full of expectations about what marriage should look like. This was simpler, more intimate, more honest. Zoe was my maid of honor. She cried through the whole ceremony, ruining her makeup, not caring at all. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered while we were taking photos afterward. "Look at you, letting yourself be happy again." "I learned from the best," I said, hugging her. "Sometimes, late at night, I think about that woman I used to be. The one who stood in her bathroom, watching her husband brush his teeth and knew something was wrong, but didn't want to believe it. The one who hired a private investigator to confirm what she already knew in her bones. The one who sat in a lawyer's office, planning the dismantling of her marriage with the same clinical precision she'd once used to build it. That woman was brave in ways she didn't recognize at the time. She was strong enough to face the truth, to demand better, to walk away from something comfortable but dishonest in pursuit of something real. She survived the worst kind of betrayal and came out the other side, not broken, but transformed. I'm grateful to her, that earlier version of myself. She did the hard work that made this life possible. She chose dignity over denial, clarity over comfortable lies. She learned that you can't save a relationship by yourself, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let it end. Marcus sent me a card when he heard about my wedding to Ben. It was brief, just a few lines wishing me happiness and saying he was glad I'd found someone worthy of me. I appreciated the gesture, tucked the card away in a drawer, and didn't think about it again. He was part of my past now, a chapter that taught me things but was definitively closed. I didn't need his validation or his regret. I had my own life, my own love, my own hard-won peace. 4 years into my marriage with Ben, We were having breakfast on our back deck when he asked me something I'd never really considered. Do you think you would have ended up here, this happy, this settled, if Marcus hadn't betrayed you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Honestly, probably not. I would have stayed in that marriage. Probably forever. I would have convinced myself that steady and safe was enough. That love didn't need to be passionate or particularly honest, as long as it was comfortable. I would have become smaller and smaller, taking up less space, needing less, until I'd disappeared into the role of dutiful wife. So in a weird way, his affair was a gift. The worst kind of gift, I said. The kind that nearly destroyed me. But yes, in a way, it was. It forced me to face truths I'd been avoiding. It made me ask myself what I actually wanted from life, not what I thought I was supposed to want. It taught me that I could survive losing everything and rebuild something better from the wreckage. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm just someone who learned to choose herself. That shouldn't be remarkable, but I guess in a world that teaches women to be accommodating and selfless, maybe it is. 5 years after my divorce, I got a message from Sienna Walsh. It came through my professional email, marked personal. Dr. Vasquez, it read, I hope it's okay that I'm reaching out. I wanted you to know that I've been in therapy for the past 3 years, working through a lot of things, including what happened with Marcus and what I did to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted to tell you that I think about what you said to me on your porch sometimes, about learning from it. I did learn from it. I've been in a relationship for 2 years now with someone who was completely available. And when he proposed last month, the first thing I thought was that I wanted to be the kind of person who deserved that, who was honest and faithful and worthy of someone's trust. I'm working on becoming that person. Thank you for not hating me completely. Thank you for seeing me as human even when I didn't deserve it. I hope you're happy. I hope you found what you were looking for. I sat with that message for a long time, feeling complicated things. I still didn't forgive her. Not entirely. What she'd done had caused real harm, had been part of the worst period of my life. But I could acknowledge her growth, could respect that she'd done the work to become someone different. I wrote back, Sienna, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate knowing that you've done that work, that you've learned and grown. I hope your relationship brings you real joy, the kind built on honesty and mutual respect. I'm happy now, truly happy, in ways I couldn't have imagined when we last spoke. Life has a way of working out if we're brave enough to face the truth and do the hard work of healing. Best wishes for your future. That night, I told Ben about the message over dinner. How do you feel about it? He asked. Strangely peaceful, like the last lingering piece of anger, finally dissolved. She's not my villain anymore. She's just a person who made mistakes and is trying to do better. That's all any of us can do, really. You're more generous than I am. I'd probably still want to punch Marcus in the face. I laughed. Oh, don't get me wrong. If I ran into Marcus, I might feel differently. But Sienna? She was young and stupid and manipulated by someone older who should have known better. She owns that now. That's enough. The years continued to unspool, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Ben's daughter graduated high school, went to college, came back for holidays with stories about her life that made us feel ancient and delighted in equal measure. My practice thrived, more balanced now, more focused on the clients who truly needed me instead of trying to help everyone. Zoe had a show at a major Portland gallery, her paintings selling for prices that made her laugh in disbelief. I'm 47 years old and finally making real money from my art, she said at the opening. Better late than never, I guess. Better earned than rushed, I corrected. You paid your dues. This is what you deserve. Patricia retired from the practice, leaving me as the senior therapist. I mentored younger colleagues the way she'd mentored me. teaching them about boundaries and self-care and the delicate balance between helping others and losing yourself in the process. Don't be me, I told one particularly earnest young therapist. Don't work 80-hour weeks. Don't make your entire identity about being a healer. Have a life outside this office. Fall in love, travel, screw up, and learn from it. You can't help other people live authentically if you're not living authentically yourself. 7 years after my divorce, I got a call from Marcus's brother. Marcus had had a heart attack, was in the hospital, was asking for me. I sat with that request for a full day before calling back. I'm sorry, I told his brother, but I can't come. Marcus and I have been divorced for 7 years. I've moved on, remarried, built a different life. I wish him well. I hope he recovers, but I'm not the person who should be at his bedside. He said you'd say that. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry. For everything. That you deserved better. Thank you for passing that along. I appreciate it. But I already knew that. I knew it 7 years ago when I filed for divorce. I hope he finds peace. I really do. But I'm not responsible for giving it to him. Marcus survived the heart attack, I heard through the grapevine. Made a full recovery, actually. I was glad for that. Genuinely. I didn't wish him harm. But I also didn't need to be part of his life or his healing. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. 9 years after my divorce, almost exactly, I sat in my backyard with Ben on a rare sunny winter day. We were drinking coffee, reading the Sunday paper, existing in that comfortable silence that long married people develop. You know what I was thinking about? I said, how different my life is now from what I thought it would be. Not just the divorce and remarriage, but everything, who I am. What I want, what makes me happy. None of it looks like what 25-year-old Elena imagined. Better or worse? Better, so much better. Messier, definitely. More complicated, but real in a way that old life never was. I was performing back then, playing the role of who I thought I should be. Now I'm just, I don't know, living. I like this version of you, Ben said, reaching over to take my hand. The one who's messy and real and occasionally cranky. I'm not cranky. You're absolutely cranky sometimes. It's charming. I laughed, and it was my real laugh, the one that came from my belly and lit up my whole face, the one I thought I'd lost but had only misplaced for a while. That evening, I wrote in the journal Dr. Kim had encouraged me to keep all those years ago. I'd been sporadic with it at first, writing only when things felt hard or confusing. But over time, it had become a practice, a way to mark the passage of time and growth. 9 years since the marriage ended, I wrote. 9 years since I stood on my porch and told Marcus we were done. 9 years since I thought my life was over and discovered it was actually just beginning. If I could go back and talk to that earlier version of myself, the one who just discovered her husband's betrayal, I'd tell her it's going to be okay, more than okay. I'd tell her that the pain she's feeling, as sharp and overwhelming as it is, will eventually dull into something manageable. That she's stronger than she knows. That she'll survive this and build something beautiful from the wreckage. I'd tell her that betrayal isn't the end of the story, just the end of a chapter. That the best revenge isn't making him suffer, it's building a life so full and rich and authentic that what he did becomes irrelevant. That forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened, it's about refusing to let it define her future. I'd tell her that she's about to discover who she really is, stripped of all the roles and expectations and performances. And that woman, that authentic self she's about to meet, is worth everything she's about to go through to find her. But mostly, I tell her what I tell my clients, what I've learned over decades of helping people heal from their wounds. You are not what happened to you. You are how you choose to rise from it. I closed the journal and looked out the window at the life I'd built. It wasn't perfect. Ben and I argued sometimes, had to work through disagreements and misunderstandings. My work was still challenging, emotionally draining in ways that required constant vigilance about self-care. Money was sometimes tight. The house needed repairs I kept putting off. Life was complicated and messy and often frustrating. But it was mine. Authentically, completely mine. Built on honesty instead of lies, on choice instead of obligation, on love that was real instead of performative. Marcus had thought betraying me would give him something he was missing, some excitement or validation or escape from the boredom of married life. Instead, it had freed me from a marriage that was slowly suffocating us both. He'd meant to hurt me, or at least hadn't cared enough to prevent it. But ultimately, he'd given me the greatest gift, the chance to build a life that actually fit who I was instead of who I thought I should be. I hope he found what he was looking for, whatever that was. I hope he learned to be honest with himself and whoever came after me. I hope he grew from his mistakes instead of just repeating them. But mostly, I hope he found a way to be happy that didn't involve hurting other people. Because that's all any of us can really do, right? Try to be happy, try to be honest, try to do less harm than we do good. As for me, I'm still learning, still growing, still figuring out this whole being human thing. But I'm doing it authentically now, without masks or performances or elaborate lies I tell myself about what I want and who I am. I'm doing it surrounded by people who know the real me and love her anyway. I'm doing it in a marriage built on truth instead of convenience. And on the days when I think about Marcus, about that woman I used to be, about everything that happened, I feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the pain, never for that, but for the lessons, for the strength I discovered I had, for the life I built from the ruins of the one that fell apart. They say the best revenge is living well. I don't know if I believe in revenge anymore, but I do believe in living well, in choosing joy, in building something real from honest materials. And that's exactly what I've done. The mountain still stands outside my window, patient and permanent. And I sit here in my life, surrounded by tools and love and possibilities, feeling exactly like I'm where I need to be. Not perfect, not healed completely, still carrying some scars that ache on certain days, but whole, authentic, free. And that finally is enough.